Good evening, Harlem and Harlems of the world. I am Terri Wisdom, and this is Harlem Network News. And as many of you know, Harlem Network News started at the onset of COVID, and we are still here. We're an essential service during these trying times in Harlem and Harlems of the world, and that encompasses everywhere that we are as Black people, as people of color. We know that it's important as Black media that we continue to do our Black job, making sure that the people are informed, engaged, and called to action. Often mainstream media doesn't cover our stories or misrepresents our stories, and this causes a lot of confusion and lack of knowledge. And especially in these times of this presidential election, all of the things that are going on in Gaza, in Africa, in our own city, it's really important that we, the Black media, be able to raise up and share our voices and make sure that people are duly informed. So that is why we're here. And today is very befitting that we have with us a community person that's coming out of community legacy, international legacy, and that is in the person of Brother Cinque Brath. And he is a son of the community, one of the children of Elombe Brath and Helene Namsa Brath. So I'm going to just have Brother Cinque say hello, tell us who he is, whose he is. And we just had a street naming right here in Harlem on Saturday, so he'll share a bit about that for his powerful mother who did much and more. So just share, Cinque, who you are, whose you are, and let us know, because one of the things at Harlem Network News, we make sure that we don't assume what people know. We try to share with them. So we want to make sure that people know who was Elombe Brath, who was Helene Namsa Brath, who are these giants of our community, our Black world.
Well, today I will focus on my mother because she had the recent street name, and although my father's birthday is tomorrow,
all right.
And not only that, I in all honesty, I always tell people, if I start to talk about my father's impact, it's just really not enough time. There's so many things that even sometimes I have to prepare for, just in terms of his contributions and things like that. But being that we're coming fresh off my mother's street naming, who better to talk to than me, because, I have been her archivist for as long as I can remember.
Wow.
And always appreciated the work that she did in the community and the things that she did. And I was someone who always reminded her, like, Mom, that's significant, because I was impacted, So my mother, Helene Namsa Brath, she was a woman who is known for several things. And I say the first thing she is known for is being a Grandassa model. And that's when she was very young. She started as a Grandassa model. The Grandassa models are part of the African Jazz Art Society and Studio Organization. And they started off with these Grandassa models. It was 8 original ones. My mother and Queen Black Rose were the last 2 left. My mother transitioned in October, and now there's only Black Rose. There are other Grandassa models, but I'm just talking about the inaugural ones.
Right, the initial
kicked
Black.
off January 28th, 1962.
Right,
yes.
Okay.
So the distinction of being one of those first 8 is something significant in there. In addition, her legacy as a Grandassa model was not just as a model, but she was also inside the Grandassa model. She was part of the group of Grandassa models called the Committee to Restore Racial Pride. And
All
when you
right.
see those pictures of the Black women who had boycotted the wig stores and picketed Ebony Jet or the Black magazines that were guilty of the colorism, not showing our darker skinned sisters, women of a darker hue. That change came because of protests and boycotts. So though the committee, those women who were part of the Grandassa Models, they were part of the committee to restore racial pride. They were the ones who did that. And so my mother was not just a Grandassa, but she was part of that group, you know.
Okay,
And in
we
the early years,
celebrate. We celebrate her.
yeah, and in the early years, she's also, if you look in those maps, you see that she was the president of Grandassa Models when they functioned
Okay,
in that way, in the early
excellent,
years.
excellent.
Yes. So that's one thing that she is celebrated for. One of the other big things she is celebrated for is her role in creating legislation that saved a lot of children's lives in Harlem, because she made a connection between asbestos and mesothelioma. They
Hmm.
had been known, but nothing had been done about it. Not
Okay,
only did she make the connection, she did the work to enforce the connection. So the Asbestos Hazard Act of 1979 is based on her work. She's included in about
wow.
8 different books. Um, in there though, she's listed as Helene Brathwaite.
Okay,
Of
thank you
course,
for
we know
sharing.
her as Helene Namsa Brath. Even
Okay,
though she had taken on the name Namsa earlier, she wasn't always called that. And
okay,
when she ran for, when she was involved as PTA president, she ran under, I mean, her flyer said Helene Brathwaite.
okay. Thank you for,
Brath is a shortening of the last name Brathwaite. So
okay.
sometimes I have uncle, one just transitioned, his name is Kwame Brathwaite.
Right.
Oh,
Yes.
brother.
Amazing.
Yes,
Amazing photographer. And,
yes, indeed.
really,
Yeah,
I know they just had the exhibit of The Black is Beautiful that
yes.
displayed his work, the book.
Hmm.
So,
Yes, I saw that exhibit in every state it was in, even though
all right.
except for North Carolina, where I went to undergraduate school. It was in
Okay.
Winston-Salem, and I went to school in Greensboro, which is 15 minutes away. But
Okay.
there's certain, you can't catch everything. My schedule wouldn't allow it. But I saw
Okay. Well,
everything in
that's a
Detroit.
beautiful thing. And I know you're
Yeah,
part of the HBCU community.
oh, definitely. I am a
Yes.
proud Aggie,
All
even
right.
though, I have,
Okay.
even though
Beautiful.
we have some reason these days to chagrin because of our football team. They looking horrible these days. But
Okay.
hey, proud is not about just sports. It's about what we do in the classroom and what we
Absolutely.
accomplish. So,
Absolutely.
but
It's
nonetheless,
holistic.
Aggie pride.
Okay. I love it. I love it.
But and then I have another uncle named John Brathwaite. Um,
Okay.
he's still alive, but they use Brathwaite. My father has not used Brathwaite for a very, 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 very long time, for as long
Okay.
as I can remember.
Okay.
So
Well,
sometimes people don't know the connection,
yes,
but
no, very important. Thank you for
yeah,
sharing that because, I mean, this is historic to have you on to speak about the Brath and the Brathwaite family
mhm,
because there was much that was done, much that happened. And just speaking about your mother and the Grandassa models, which
mhm,
really capsulize the Black is Beautiful movement. And as you speak of Black Rose,
mhm,
we salute her,
yeah,
remaining initial Grandassa models when I was probably 16 years old.
mhm.
And I lived in Queens. I got my first Afro from Black Rose. So
Wow.
she's a legend. And, it was more than getting an Afro. It was an anointing. It was poetry said. It was, you
Yes.
know, it was just a powerful thing. So,
And
and
you
I,
know, I don't know if you know, she was doing poetry up until her early 90s until her stroke.
yes,
She
I'm
still was,
I'm aware. I
yeah.
know. She and I, her birthday, I think, is the same day as mine. So we always had a lot of connection.
Mhm.
Yeah, so that's a blessing. But if you could share a little bit, because we're going to talk about the street naming. I'm Terri Wisdom. This is Harlem Network News, but we're really here with just legacy,
Yeah.
world legacy, Black world legacy.
Mhm.
Um, and we are just saying we know that the ancestors are rejoicing, your parents and all the ancestors, your uncle, or all the family, that the children, the next generation, are
Mhm.
doing such great work
Yeah.
to keep the work going, to keep the legacy alive. But if you could just share a little bit about AJAZ, what that stands for, and the connection of AJAZ and the Black is Beautiful movement and the arts movement.
Okay,
Just
so
thank
AJAZ is an acronym for African Jazz Art Society and Studio. It was a group of Black creatives who set out with the mission to save jazz as an African art form. They were worried about the interlopers outside the community stealing jazz, as has happened with so many of our creations, especially
okay.
our art. AJazz, when they were first founded, my father first took out the ad to declare this nonprofit organization in the paper was not AJazz. At that time, they were Jazz Art Society, right? They were just JAS. That was
Okay.
1956. They became African in 1959. And most of that happened because there's a gentleman named Carlos Cooks. He was the
Okay.
founder of the African Nationalist Pioneer Movement. My father was the director of information for the African Nationalist Pioneer Movement. And he used to do, again, to do flyers for them. He joined Carlos Cook's organization. Um, so Carlos Cooks had a convention to abrogate the term Negro in 1959. After that convention to abrogate the term Negro in 1959, they put African in front of the jazz, and they became African Jazz Art Society. They technically did not become studio until 1961 when they left the Bronx and came to.
Okay.
So
Okay.
in Harlem is when they really became AJazz. Although there are some flyers in 1959 and 1920 that might say AJazz, AJASS, but the S was for the studio. Prior to that, everything was happening in my grandparents' basement in the Bronx on Kelly
Okay.
Street, where the street has been renamed also after African Jazz Art Society and Studio Organization. And for those who do not know or not, AJazz is the first Black arts organization in the history of the world. Founded in 1956. A lot of books and recordings put the start of the Black arts movement in 1965.
Mhm.
But but the start of the Black arts movement that they're talking about started much further earlier than that. And the other day, about 6 weeks ago, I was talking with our sister Amina Baraka about it, and she's like, "Yeah, a lot of stuff even is attributed to her husband in terms of that." No,
Right.
Ajaz
Yes.
did that. She was with Ajaz. That's how she got to meet Abby Lincoln and Max Roach and all that. And when he was then Leroy Jones and them, they came to Harlem. When they came to New York, they was down in the village. Ajaz was
Okay.
already in
Yes.
Harlem doing it.
All
So
right. So
that's
there's a lot of just everybody's got to listen and
right.
open up the mind, because there's a
Oh
lot
yeah,
of cross pollination
definitely,
as we
definitely.
speak of formerly Leroy Jones, Imamu Baraka,
Right.
Amina Baraka, and then Baraka. We know what time it is because
Yeah.
we've
Oh yeah.
got Mayor Raz Baraka and
Records.
Deputy Mayor Midi Baraka.
Indeed.
So the legacies continue.
Yeah, but I mean, even when you say that, even Amina Baraka, who speaks extensively about it, it's not any disrespect to her family's legacy or anything. She will tell you, and she admits firsthand, no, this is what really happened. This is how it is.
Beautiful.
Most of the books have it wrong. Like,
Okay,
as
so
I said, I just spoke
that's why Harlem Network News is
yeah,
here.
yeah.
So that we
I
can
even
get
have
the story
recordings of me
right.
us talking and her saying the same thing I would say about the history of the Black arts movement. But even when we're talking about Black arts, a lot of people look at it differently. Some say that what they look at as the Black arts movement, that a lot of books put at 65 is the second Black arts movement anyway. That we can look at Langston Hughes, Zora Neale Hurston, and all of that history of the Harlem Renaissance is the first Black arts movement, because really you have to look at from a historical vantage point, what is the difference? Many of them were also Black nationalists also.
Mhm.
They and their creative arts, reflected the same sort of sentiment. So a lot of times it really depends on how one defines Black arts movement. But usually anytime I'm reading something, I can tell what a person is talking about, because they say in second. So when I say the first Black arts movement organization, I'm talking about that period in the 60s and everything. So A-Jazz was the first. A-Jazz had theater component. A-Jazz had a
Okay,
repertory theater. A-Jazz had the A-Jazz griots. They did poetry. You know what I'm saying?
okay.
A-Jazz had Grandassa Models. A-Jazz had everything with the music and everything. I think a lot of part of the misconception came was because of the popularity of somebody. Mary Baraka, brother Leroy Jones at that time did Dutchman, and
Right.
he was very, very popular based on that.
Dutchman and the
Yeah,
slave.
yeah.
Mhm.
So a lot of times, and even Amina, I tell you, she didn't even know who he was, because we
Right.
was already doing everything right
Right.
here in Harlem
Right.
at that time,
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
again, as I said, what I'm saying is really not controversial, because
No,
really
of course
doesn't
not. No,
matter. It doesn't matter the age of
we're
anybody.
all one.
Yeah,
We are
yeah,
all
they're all
one.
one. There's
And
no right, and there's technically there's no beef, because I can go to the historical record. I have archival material in storage. I've been through it all, and I can document anything that I say. I'm not speaking about an opinion, and
Mhm.
there's others again around who can verify it. So
Right.
when I say that AJAS is the first Black arts organization, I'm talking about for that second wave. I'm not talking about that early Harlem
That period
Renaissance.
of time.
Right,
I have
that's
a
right.
question for you. I'm
Yes.
here with Cinque Brath, and we are having a broad conversation. We did have the street naming for his mother, who passed more recently, Helene Namsa Brath, who was a great community activist, educator, and his father, Elombe Brath, who was many things, radio personality, Pan-Africanism, connection to Libya, and you'll have to, speak
Yeah.
that out. Also worked at ABC TV as a graphic artist, for many
He's
years.
also a consultant for international affairs for
Yes.
Like It Is.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah. So, I mean, I had the privilege and honor of working at ABC at some of the times that he was there, and I saw some of the great people like Eric Tate there yesterday from ABC 2020 senior
And
producer.
Terry, if anybody wants,
Oh,
it's not in print
beautiful.
right now, but the book Elombe Brath, Selected Writings and Essays, edited by her boy. If they have
Okay.
this, they can read in the early part, the introduction by Bernard White, where he talks about why, what international event happened where the State Department came in and said my father couldn't work in Like It Is anymore. So just for the record, it's been documented in here by uh, Bernard White, the former general manager of WBAI Radio.
Mm,
I
okay.
mean, in this
So,
book, there's a lot of documentation of a lot of things, but right now it's not back in print. That's something that's going to soon happen. One of the things the Elombe Brath Foundation has going is a lot of projects. So this is just one of them, the reintroduction of this book.
okay. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that. This is Harlem Network News, and I'm Terri Wisdom. And we are speaking with Cinque Brath. And just tell us a bit, because now there are really technically 3 streets named for your family, most recently your mother.
Mhm.
Yesterday, if you could just share where that is, the street
Well,
naming for your father.
I want to clarify something because people mentioned it yesterday.
Okay,
People said uh it's not the first ever Black married couple with a street naming. The first ever Black married couple are Ruby D and Ossie Davis. They share a street co-naming on 122nd Street, but it is the first where two people have a separate street co-namings. So to my understanding, in the history of New York City, there are 3 street namings of couples. But the other 2 both share the same street corner with both married people's names on it.
okay,
Um, so this is just the first ever where they both have their own street. You know,
okay, okay.
because one thing that I didn't, because we got started late yesterday, I didn't really get to officiate the event in the way that I wanted to. I let
Okay,
the
you did a
guests tell their
great and
story.
fabulous job.
Thank you. You know,
Thank
I
you.
mean, I think somehow that Storm, she has something to do with
Okay.
it.
Yes, Storm
You
Helene.
know, because as I said, there was a lot going into it. As you can see, there was scaffolding, and we
Yes.
worked hard with the city to first get it removed, change. It was a whole thing going, and if the scaffolding would have been removed, it would have been very problematic. You know,
Okay.
because although we had the tents, as you can see, it still have been
Right.
problems.
Yes.
So, you know, it was good that the scaffolding was still there.
All in divine order.
Right,
Yeah.
all in
And
divine order.
scaffolding in New York City is quite an issue.
Right.
Quite
So
an issue. Yeah, quite an
right. But I wanted to, in regard to the 2 thing with the couple, I just wanted to clear that up. It's only the first time that a couple has 2 separate, but it's not the first. It's actually the 3rd. And for our
okay.
community, it's the 2nd because
Okay.
Ossie and I was there at Ossie Davis and Ruby D Street
Okay.
ceremony a
Okay.
few years ago.
Fantastic.
So, but yes, there are 3. My father, so my father's on 125th Street. And what a lot of people don't know, my father was responsible also for a lot of the street namings. Right perpendicular to his street naming, if you see right there where it says African Square, it used to
Yes.
say African Liberation Square. He
Hmm.
got Percy Sutton, who was then, at that time, it was not a city councilman who did it, it was the borough president. He told
Okay.
Percy
Beautiful.
Sutton, he told Percy he wanted Percy to rename the street right there because Harlem is basically had been the epicenter of the world. You know what was happening here.
Yeah, it
So
Harlem
we had
is. So
corner
goes
streets
Harlem,
like
so
that.
goes the world.
There it is. There it is. So it was very important because a lot of countries were looking to come up under the yoke of colonization at that time. It was very important for our people here to understand what colonization was in Africa, and these countries needed to be free. So that street was initially called African Liberation Square. I have a shirt with my father and Percy Sutton on a ladder, and in a full picture, you even see some Garveyites under with a banner saying Africa for the Africans, those at home and those abroad.
Mm.
Today
Okay.
it says African Square, but that was only changed more recently when my father got sick.
Mhm.
Somebody made a decision. He can't
Okay.
fight them.
Okay.
And not only that, but it could have been a decision.
I love it when you bring in the interjection,
Yeah.
Africa for the Africans,
Yeah.
because I believe Carlos Cook was, part of the
Oh,
Marcus Garvey movement.
he's his
So
Carlos Cook's his ideological son.
yes,
He more
yes.
than anybody else, he picked up all of Carlos Cook's teachings and works when
Hmm.
he came here from the Dominican Republic,
Hmm.
and he got busy, you know. But
Okay.
he's definitely his idea. I mean, that's his ideological son.
Yeah,
You know
so
what I
we
mean?
have a lot of rich history. So we have the street naming for your mom, Helene Namsa Brath, and that's at
Mhm.
112th and Adam Clayton Powell Jr. Boulevard.
Yeah.
And then right at 125th and the cross section of Adam Clayton Powell Jr. Boulevard. That is the street naming for your father,
Right.
Elombe Brath.
Mhm.
And then we have in the Bronx,
Mhm.
and you can share
And then
that
I'm in the
street.
Bronx. But before we go to the one in the Bronx,
Mhm.
that I did, I have to make mention of the fact that African Liberation Square, my father created that right there. I mean,
Okay.
Percy Sutton gave him the latitude. Percy was not really in that vein, but Percy respected him and like, okay, this is what you want to do, this is what we're gonna do. But that's why it was. See, now it sounds like it's just like a flea market, African Square, but it was
Right.
originally there to wake up the consciousness of the people. And
Okay.
I have photos where you see African Liberation Square. We didn't have Google Maps and all that, but
Right.
so
Right.
where he's at now, the four corners surrounding him, he just so happened to come up with that idea and name those corners. So,
Okay. Okay.
so
So,
now we go to Jazz. It's Kelly Street. So my grandparents on my father's side migrated from Barbados to New
okay.
York. First, my father
Beautiful.
was actually born in Brooklyn and raised in the Bronx. So that's where Ajaz was born, 756 Kelly Street. The street naming was right at the corner of Kelly Street, right outside of the Bill Rainey Park. Bill Rainey, I think he was a Tuskegee Airman. That park had been named after him. And
Okay.
so so this was an honoring not just my father Elombe Brath and my uncle Kwame Brathwaite founded the organization um, at that time, but in again my grandparents' basement.
Okay.
Um, but it's also a celebration of all of those creatives: Bob Gums,
Mhm.
Frank Adu,
Yes.
Mendice Hall. You know what I mean? Uh,
Mhm.
just say Ernest Baxter, even if Ernest Baxter, who you heard speak
Right.
yesterday,
Yes.
he hadn't come up from South Carolina yet, but he's part of that. Cletus Williams, who recently passed. Um,
Cleta, I believe it's Cleta Smith.
I'm sorry. Oh gosh,
Yes. Okay.
thank you, Cletus Smith. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I'm just off the cuff,
Yeah. No, no, no. This is
you
important.
know, and all of these, I mean, like Chris Asmendese Hall doesn't get the recognition, but he created the first African superhero, Little Zing, 3 years before the Black
All
Panther.
right.
You know what
Okay.
I mean? And that's just one of the things he did. I mean, he also was a songwriter. They were all creatives. So there's a book out called The Artistic Activism of Elombe Brath. It's done
Okay.
by a professor named Thomas Aiello. It's
Is
actually
it, you said the artistic?
yeah, Artistic Activism of Elombe Brath.
Okay.
It's right over there. I probably get it. If you
Okay.
want to
No
see the
problem.
cover? Give me 1 second. I'll show you the cover.
Okay. Okay. So this is Harlem Network News, and I'm Terri Wisdom. And we are just having a robust conversation, really our living history, telling our stories. We're here with Cinque Brath. Okay. All right. So we
As you
can see
see,
the book,
this book
The
is called the Art.
Artistic.
It's done by Thomas Aiello, coming out of the University Press of Mississippi. It's really designed to be a textbook because there everybody who's a history major taking certain courses in the South have to buy this book and read it. It's an introduction of a book because most of the time the professor recognized that and his staff recognized that a lot of times sometimes they put my father in the civil rights category and he
Mhm.
really not wasn't he was age at he was not about civil rights. That was not their thing. Neither was we just talked about Carlos Cooks. That wasn't really their thing, but everybody gets, even Malcolm would talk about like it's not civil rights for them, human rights and other different sort of rights, but they were not asking for all the same things at that time. And there's a book that my father had done, which was called Color Us Colored in 1963. It was basically a satire of Black leadership at the time. they took that book, the other book I showed you, and this became this book here. But it was and they looked at some of the pillaring of some of the people who my father had in that book. They got a lot of it right. They did some great research. They didn't get everything right in the things they said, but this is the book here. It was the first of a few books, but they had planned to do another. They had planned to do a similar book by other personalities who could not be historically placed in that civil rights category. That's because that's really not what they were about. Their ideology, etc., was something different. But because of the, as you said, the way others tell our story, they're really lacking understanding of what we're talking about and what we're trying to do.
Okay.
So
Well,
that's
this is, you know, I mean, as you said, once you begin the conversation, you know, about your father, a legend, Elombe Brath, and then your mother, another legend. I mean, this is a powerful thing, and there's a lot of information. Quickly, and then we're going to go to speak about your mother and the street naming and Helene Namsa Brath. But if you could,
But
I
Terry,
mean,
before you do that, Terry, I also want to show
okay.
you the cover of another book.
Oh,
This is
okay.
actually outside of my father's book. This is probably the second book from an AJAS member that came out. It's called The Harlem Cultural Political Movements, 1960 to 1970, from Malcolm X to Black is Beautiful. And you see a photo documentary by Cletus Smith.
Okay. Okay, I got it.
In the 90s.
I got it.
Yeah, so I mean, a lot of times these members are telling a lot of their story on their own, you know. So for
Okay.
people who want to know more, and they also, of course, they can get my Uncle Kwame's book, Kwame Brathwaite, Black is Beautiful.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. And I'm getting some notes from some of the people that are able to see this in the audience. And there's a note here: Elombe, Kwame, Cletus Smith, and a few other people, all AJAS members, including Bernardo Ruby, my partner, studied under Charles Pica in the 1960s. Every Sunday, upstairs above the Apollo. So there's lots of living history in terms of, you know, all of the people that came together. And would you say
He eventually succeeded after Carlos Cooks died. Charles Pica took over. He became the head of African Nationalist Pioneer Movement, ANPM at that time. But at that time, my father and my uncle, they were no longer in. They were only really doing the AJAS. When Carlos Cooks was there, they were both doing AJAS and ANPM at the same time. But when by the time Charles Pica, you know, there was a division after Carlos Cooks left, and some people they rather do their own thing. You know, it was a lot of, you know, anytime there's a succession, there are people trying to be in that line. But father was not interested in trying to succeed Carlos Cooks. But, you know, he had already learned what he would have from brother Carlos Cooks, and AJAS was already building upon what Carlos Cooks had done with the Naturalist show I'm sorry, with the Miss Natural Standard of Beauty to then come with their own Naturally shows.
Okay, so just as I said, lots of information. And I just wanted to touch on, this is Harlem Network News. I'm Terri Wisdom. I'm here with Cinque Brath. But when you spoke about African, for the Africans, I know there was the whole thing of about African liberation and our home, not in America, but in Africa, those kinds of things. I know that your father traveled to Africa many times and had a relationship, Namibia, you could speak about that, but there was lots that happened on that arena. And then just the fact that he was really involved with Black media you know, with Like It Is, WBAI, you know, a powerful voice that reached to the community in many ways. But if you could just speak a bit about the Pan-Africanism, or what that initiative was really about as far as your father, and then we'll go to talk about some of the things about your mother that a lot of people don't know. So
Well, my father was about waging mental warfare. You know what I mean? A lot of what happened with Ajax, that was about mental warfare, changing the way people looked at themselves, thought about themselves. The whole aesthetic of how we see ourselves is something very important. And he was very Pan-African in his scope, because not, not only because he wanted us here in the West to change the way we saw our brothers and sisters in the motherland. Because when he's coming up, there's a lot of backward thinking about Africa. You know,
yeah.
there's a lot of old footage I watched of him where he's addressing our community and he's addressing that sort of thinking. So, but it's also was problematic on a continent, the way, you know, let's put it this way, like bleaching creams sell more in Africa and the Caribbean than they do in the United States.
Yes,
A lot of
absolutely.
that is because the Black of the Beautiful movement started here. We had a struggle of consciousness and contradictions with our own community that we dealt with, which caused us to take on some of these things, you know, where people would at least be embarrassed. But
Right. Yeah.
you didn't have these the same sort of history in a lot of other places. So technically, as far as I'm concerned, they are behind in there. Now, of course, a lot of great Pan-Africanists come from everywhere on the
Right.
planet. It's not African American sort of ideology, but I think that those of us who are trying to unite our people under the red, black, and green, you know, that's the Pan-African flag, you know,
Yes, liberation.
right, red for the blood, green for the red for the blood, green for the land, black for our skin. I mean, of course, even though it's not black,
Yes.
but you know,
Yeah. The people.
right,
Yes.
for our people. So um the idea was to unify people, you know, wherever we were, wherever we existed, and for us to all see ourselves as connected. Because I mean, it's not about like, oh, I'll give you an example. Despite you would rarely see my father um just holding up a Bayesian flag, you know,
Right.
he
Yes.
wasn't into that sort of celebrating nationalistic sort of things. It was about pan. Now he'll hold up a flag, and let's say you might see him holding up a Namibian flag, but that was about getting independence
Right.
from, you know, colonizers, you know, from South Africans. You might see him holding up a flag of Zimbabwe. That's a different things. But some of the way we celebrate our, you know, different ethnicities, he really wasn't into that at that point in his life, because he just wanted I mean, whether you no matter where you came from, he wanted, his idea was for all of us to recognize we are one, and we only going to get out of this situation in a resource rich country like Africa, you know, with all of the resources that we have, when we understand that if everybody's taking what they have and like, oh, I'm from Congo, y'all can't get none of this, we not helping, you know, that doesn't serve anybody, that
Right.
people look to exploit us. So
Okay.
it was
Okay.
totally
So
about.
just the connection to Namibia, and then we're gonna
So
move on.
the connection to Namibia really started with Sam Nyomo. Sam Nyomo, he was connected to Sam Nyomo through Carlos Cooks. So Carlos Cooks, when Sam Nyomo came here, one of the things he was looking for was support for their situation. It wasn't called Namibia then. It was called
Okay.
Rhodesia. And they were looking for support against their white colonizers, and
Okay.
who were being supported by the United States and, you know, even Israel. Well, not well, Israel to a degree at that time
Okay.
also, you know. in the latter half, you know. And Sam wanted some support, and really that sort of by the time my father, all right, so initially my father worked with some other nationalists. It wasn't just Carlos Cooks. It's a few brothers. I could go grab a book and I'd have to turn a
Okay,
page to
no,
it.
that's
It's
okay.
yeah,
I just
but
wanted
I
to
can tell you some
make
of the
that point
names.
in
But
connection. It's
what
fine.
happened was they raised all this money for Sam and Yoma. They raised at that time, which would be like almost the equivalent. They said they raised the equivalent of $100,000 at that
Okay,
time, you know,
fine.
but what happened was that raising of money at that time got my father, that this was later, that got my father under the watch of the founder of not Homeland Security, but the quote unquote deep state. He was a Republican. I mean, I'm sorry, he was a Democrat from Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
And my father had then founded the Patrice Lumumba Coalition. And
Okay.
my father and his other co-founder, Irvin Davis, were looking to be brought up on charges. He had introduced it into the Congress. For some reason, I'm drawing a blank on him. There's a video on the internet. It'll come back to
Okay.
me later.
Okay.
But
So as you said, once we start talking about
yeah,
your father and then your
yeah,
mother,
it
I
pulls
mean,
up. Yeah, that's
we
why.
don't have enough
Yeah,
time.
exactly. And
So
not only that,
I just wanted to give
with my yeah, right. So when I talk
our
about my father,
audience,
sometimes even I have to brush up
yeah,
because there's
yeah,
a lot of
yeah,
names
of
people are not
course.
familiar with
And a
exactly.
lot of our history, and that's why our media is important. A lot of our history is not documented. Like it is not here. A lot, Jet, Ebony, all of these things are just not there like they used to be to really just give and tell our stories and for us to be celebrated. So it's very important from a media standpoint and an educational standpoint that we do this and we make sure that our young people know so that our history continues. This is Harlem Network News, and we want to talk about Helene Namsa Brath and some of the initiatives that your mom did. We did the street naming yesterday, and a lot of what she did is just not really known and talked about, but she was an activist in her own right.
Oh yeah, no, definitely. As I was saying, the three most important things that people should know about her was her role in the Black arts movement and Black is Beautiful movement. And those two are very closely aligned. And again, I say Ajaz is the first, when we're talking about the Black arts movement that a lot of people familiar with, Ajaz is the first Black arts movement organization on in the United States and or on the planet for the most part. Her role in that, as I explained, she was part of the committee to restore racial pride, which was a subset of Grandassa Models who created the aesthetic to deal with the contradictions about hair and skin color within our own community, the brainwashing that was happening within our community. So the second thing would be what she did in terms of the laws that we now benefit from today in schools and in the health place that she's documented in many books for saving these children in Harlem from getting cancer later in life. A lot of people didn't feel it was that important, even teachers at the school at that time,
Right.
because
Yes.
you know, asbestos breathing in, it's not something that's going to get you while you're a kid. It's going to get you
Right.
by when you
And
40 or
later in
50,
life.
later in
Yeah.
life, right,
And
and everything.
right. Yeah.
And again, even when the Board of Ed identified it, they initially hadn't done anything about it. So they were not going to finance
Environmental justice that's
environmental
big
justice.
today.
Right,
Yeah,
exactly,
very important.
exactly.
Mhm.
So basically what happened was they wanted proof. And so the only way you can get proof of asbestos being airborne, you need a machine was called a spectrometer. There,
Mm.
at that time, there were only two spectrometers on the eastern seaboard, one in New York and the other one was in Baltimore. Just so happened, for history's sake, that other spectrometer was at Mount Sinai.
Okay.
But how was you going to get it from Mount Sinai to 112th Street? You needed to have some money. So
Okay.
she designed a fundraiser for cookies and cakes and all that. Everybody, we went home. So, but that money was going to finance her bringing the spectrometer to the school. So basically, when she got that money, she paid to have that spectrometer transported to the school. And it was sort of like a cartoon, as she retells the story to me. When they got that machine at 185 and 208 and they turned it on, bingo. It could
Wow.
see that asbestos was
Wow.
airborne. Our
Wow. That's
children had been breathing it. It
mm,
had been it was a danger.
mm,
Despite and so she's like, we closing the schools down. She had a
wow.
good friend called Ruby Kitchen, who was on the
Mm,
community school board. In fact, Ruby Kitchen
okay.
is having a street naming in
Okay.
November.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
That's a good friend of hers, you
Okay.
know. And yeah, she said, no, we're shutting the schools down. So that began the start of it. It didn't happen, it almost happened overnight, but she also had the assistance, I have to say, of Claiborne Pell, a senator from Rhode Island,
Mhm.
and Jacob Javits, who the Javits Center
Okay.
is named after
Okay.
downtown. When
Wow.
I asked her about it, because I was kind of surprised about it, she's like, no, they were interested in saving these kids at that time too, and they gave her all the support she needed. But
Okay.
it really, the support that kept the movement going was her testimony at congressional and Senate hearings, where she was
Mm,
labeled a whistleblower under Ralph Nader's whistleblower law. And,
woo,
basically, just saying what the problem was, because New York is not going to want to start doing all this renovation and abatement.
right.
It costs
Yeah.
them millions and millions of dollars.
Yes,
So
absolutely.
that's why, even though they knew, yeah, that's asbestos there, their whole thing was that wasn't enough to close the school. That if
Mhm.
she needed to do the fundraiser to get the spectrometer to the school so they could
Mhm.
see, no, you see what
Right.
we see? Because you
Yeah.
can't see asbestos, airborne asbestos with your eye.
Right.
It only
Wow.
requires
That is
specific scientific.
so empowering. You
Yeah,
know, the fact that she was able to just make that happen. And then, I mean, your parents had children. I don't know how,
yeah,
how many of you are, five or six,
seven.
majority seven,
Yeah,
majority male. You know what I'm
yeah,
saying? So that is a lot to do the work, to raise your children, to keep the economics going, and to keep as a family. So that's
oh,
a
yeah.
very powerful thing that your parents were able to do that. And on the education side, I know your mother was an educator. We heard about the homeschooling. And one of the community stories that I heard, and he was there yesterday, our new council member, Dr. Yusef Salam, formerly, now of the Exonerated Five. But I heard the story of how, because of the danger at that time, because
Mhm.
the five, the Central Park Five, quote, 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 it wasn't safe for them to go to school
Yeah.
because of all this stuff Donald Trump had done and said, and so I understood that your mother helped to homeschool at least Dr. Yusef Salam and others.
Yeah.
That's a powerful
Yeah.
thing.
And well, Raymond Santana,
And Raymond, yes.
his 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 sister's kids also.
Right.
I
Yeah. So
mean, yeah,
that's
I was away in college, so my room is free and open.
okay. So that's
Yeah.
very empowering, doing that community work. And then the other thing we heard about, the
No, but
mothers
I want to say
organization.
that organization my mother co-founded to deal with
Mhm.
that was called Mother's Love. But
Mothers Love.
they had,
Yes.
yeah, they had to change the name because Aisha Grice reminds Sharon Salam that another organization had that name. But if
Aisha Jihada Grice. She used to
yes,
write for
yes, Aisha could tell you the
Essence
story.
Horoscope.
She is like, got
Whoa.
to change that, yeah, because another organization had that name.
Okay.
And of
Well.
course, eventually Sharon took it over and she changed the
Mhm.
name anyway. You know what
Right.
I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
But at that time, the importance of mother's love, because if you remember that case, there was a time where a lot of people in our community got to the point, once the DNA came back and didn't match anybody, they were
Mhm.
saying that nothing happened to her. She wasn't raped. They were some name
Right.
calling going on and everything
Yeah.
like that. But my mother, being a woman, was still sympathetic to this white female jogger who
Mhm.
something happened to her. You know
Right.
what I
Yes,
mean? She was
absolutely.
unconscious. She had no, and she, so they needed to form women speaking for these young men's exoneration, but also still with the sensitivity that was
Right.
happening in
The
caught
women.
some
Yes.
in the community
Right.
who were going a little bit overboard with
Right. Yeah.
it, but
Yeah.
understandably. So that's really how Mother's Love came to be,
Mm.
getting those parents and mothers organized. And even after
Okay.
you're incarcerated, you still have other kids. You still have responsibilities. So, and that along with the some of the women who I had on yesterday, international workers women who
Yes.
worked at radio and things like that. They set up interviews and they were very coordinated and specific about how they wanted to advocate for these young teenage
Mm.
children who had been wrongfully incarcerated, and get that out and just stay on top of it, because
Mm.
there was a battle, especially in media, even in progressive media, about the
Right.
truth of the case. I've
Right.
had several attorneys from that time saying, "Hey, I was wrong about them. I thought that
Right.
was,
Yeah. Right.
in
And it's
hindsight."
a big thing to be able to admit that you're wrong. And
Yes.
it's also a big thing to be about humanity. You know what I'm saying? Black, white humanity,
Mhm.
because that's, really what we have to look at. So
Mhm.
we have a lot to unpack, a lot to do. We're going to wind down because, as you said, it would be we'd be here all night, just sharing and talking. But what about your organization that you're starting and keeping the work going? If you could just share a bit about that.
Well, you mean the Elombe Brath Foundation, or
Yes,
oh,
yes.
the Elombe
Yeah.
Brath Foundation? Initially, our goal was really just to document his history and legacy, preserve these things. So, for example, my father has thousands of hours of tape from the Patrice Lumumba Coalition events that used to happen in Harlem all the time on Friday nights. People
Mhm,
like Thomas Sankara coming there, people
mhm,
as we just mentioned, Sam Yomo, president, the
mhm,
recently transitioned president of the Sam Yomo,
mhm,
even when he was prime minister, all these uh, heads of state from Africa and the Caribbean. This is what it was, their meeting place. This is where they came. A lot of times
mhm,
they chose him because his role in media, not with the Patrice Lumumba Coalition, because they also understood he could get them on television and get the message of what was happening in these other
mhm,
places in Africa out to our people here, and
mhm.
we could get some momentum behind these things. It's very important to be on like it is at the time. And my
Yes,
father,
absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah,
consultants
that
for
was a
international.
lifeline.
Yeah, that's the
Lifeline,
lifeline. So,
lifeline and information,
right.
and that's why media is so important and we've got to do everything we can. We see it, this is Terry Wisdom, Harlem Network News, but we
Mhm.
see what is happening right here in the city with the mayor,
Yeah.
Eric Adams, and how, he's being tried in the media, different things are being said, but we're not really getting any full information. So this is critical. And even in our presidential elections, what is actually happening, what people need to know and understand about Netanyahu and him being at the UN. We're not getting the clear information, which has people confused, particularly our children that are looking to TikTok to find the information.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
we've got
but,
to,
one of the beauties of that time is that nowadays you got 3,000 channels and stuff, and you
yeah,
still really have nothing on. At that
right,
time, you had 7, 9 channels, and so if you were
mhm,
on TV and you had a show, everybody's gonna know what's going on. Everybody's
right,
getting the message.
yes, yes, yeah,
And like it was the Black Public Affairs show. Man, I
mhm,
mean, we had Tony Brown's Journal, etc. But
right, yes,
like it
yes,
was more of an international sense and
yeah.
scope,
Gil Noble, Brother
yeah,
Gil Noble,
they'll know, yeah. And
yeah,
so,
yeah,
my father was bringing these like these leaders or soon to be presidents, and these people who were in exile in their countries, but they
mm,
were part of guerrilla movements, in
right,
their country. Oh, it just came to me. The gentleman
okay,
about was Larry McDonald. he was a Democrat from Georgia. He tried to have my father and uh the
You
other
just said it.
co-founder of which I said earlier, the other
Right.
co-founder, Irvin Davis.
Yes.
He was bringing up, trying to have a hearing on that because the money that they raised for Sam and Yomo was, of course, they're gonna do. They purchasing arms. We talking about guerrilla struggle, but technically, they gave him the money to support the liberation movement, but United States, of course, was really fully in support of South Africa. And when we're talking about South Africa, let us be clear, we're not just talking about South, we're talking about the West. Sam and Young was part of an organization called SWAPO, Southwest
Right. Yes.
Organization. You know, um, whether we're talking about these South Africa, Namibia, Zimbabwe, all of their countries are tied into one liberation struggle. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? It's not like people just think about apartheid. It's great when we see Stetson Sonic do AFRICA. So in fact, if you speak to Daddy O said that he got all of that information from my father. That's how he
Okay.
created the song. It was he said that him and Kwame Ture, if you see the first time they ever performed that song publicly, you see
Mhm.
Kwame Ture and also Samori Marksman, who used to run the Caribbean
Right.
Cultural
Yes.
Resource Center. All of
Mhm.
them are on stage behind Stetson Sonic. And so
Wow.
that's what Daddy Yo told me about it, because
Mhm.
they wanted, like, get this out in a way that people can understand it.
Mhm.
What's really happening to our brothers and sisters across the sea. I mean, I love the way, and of course, at that time, one of my favorite songs. I love the way he did it, and I never knew that my father
Where the
worked
source,
with that. Yeah,
where it came
right. I
from.
never knew that.
So we have a lot of history. We have a lot of things to share. We really salute you and all of your siblings for the great work that you all are doing in terms of keeping the legacy, and even across your cousin, your uncle's son,
Mhm.
young Kwame
Kwame, yeah.
Brathwaite, for really being a force. He's an attorney, but a force in making sure that his father's book got out there, that the
Mhm.
exhibits traveled around. So you all are keeping the legacy alive. We appreciate you. We expect to hear great things, and we're going to pick up on this conversation so we can really educate the people more. But if you would just, this is Harlem Network News. I'm Terri Wisdom, Black media doing my Black job. And oh, there we go. But if you would just give us some closing statement and inspiration, and we're going to close out. And we thank you so much for taking the time. And you and your family and the community did an amazing job of the street naming. And we encourage everybody to go to that corner, go to the corner 125th and Adam Clayton Powell Jr. Boulevard, and go to the Bronx, and just know the significance. Someone said yesterday that it's very significant that we name these streets after our people we know, because a lot of streets are named after just people we don't even know who they are. So this is important, and this is putting down our legacy and our community. So
Well,
closing statement.
I would say that everybody can do a little something. In addition to being the president of the Elombe Brath Foundation, I'm also a board member of an organization called Ujima Pan African Media Archives. Our acronym is UPAMA. One of the things our mission goal is in that organization, there's a lot of information that took place in this on reel, it's on older forms of medium. We're in the process of digitizing these things. So a lot of young people now, they think everything that they're seeing and having transpire is new. It's not really new. They just haven't seen that a lot of these struggles and a lot of these conflicts have happened before we had social media and before everything was digital. So we're trying a lot of forums that happen all in the New York, New Jersey area that we find are significant, getting them digitized and putting them online for some of the younger people, some of the, not just lay people, but historians, people taking up history search. I mean, because what better way to solve things? As Malcolm would say, history is a good teacher. So we feel like it's very important for some of these voices that they missed or they had never heard or don't have access to, because the media is changing. But before digital, these things get digitized. And so I want to just shout out Upama, and people can go online at upamainc.org.
Thank you.
Bookmark us on that. But I just think that like everybody can do a little bit. And with the gentrification, land grab taking place in Harlem, yes, I do think that it's very important that we have streets named after people who reflect us. I am not. I'm very aware that one of our a great person in the community, Eddie Ellis, also had a street name earlier that same
Okay.
day on
All right.
151st
Let's
Street.
go.
I got pictures of my father, mother, and Eddie Ellis at my father's birthday. Also,
Okay.
all three of them in that picture all have a street
Okay.
name.
Beautiful.
You know,
Beautiful.
it's a
Beautiful.
beautiful
And share
thing.
with, once again, Harlem Network News. Let them know who is Eddie Ellis.
Eddie Ellis is one of the founders. There's a theory, it was more than a theory now, it's kind of been proven, hypothesis. He's a co-founder of the seven neighborhood theory, which is said that the prison population, or like 80% of it, comes from seven neighborhoods in New York City.
Wow.
Bedford-Stuyvesant, Fort Greene. There's one in Harlem, the other South Bronx. I don't know what all of them off the top of my head, but Eddie was a
Ladies,
Black
South
Panther.
Jamaica, Queens.
Yeah, exactly. Eddie was a Black Panther, but he's not a Black Panther from the Huey Newton line
Era.
of Black Panther. There was another set of Black Panthers. There
Mhm.
was the offshoot at that same time, and
Okay.
he fell under the watch of the FBI before, because of his activism. He did 25 years in prison. He
Ooh.
worked with a lot of prisoners,
Mm.
rehabilitated those prisoners. And Eddie he founded two organizations, that prisoners and people who've been through the system use still today. So he co-founded them with others, but he was the spokesperson, and he also had a radio show on WBAI called On the Count, which a lot of people used to listen to know
Okay.
what's going on in our prisons. This stuff with Rikers happening and all this stuff. Eddie and a lot of these prisoners been talking about this from a scholarly sense, bringing us statistics about these things when nobody else was listening, and it wasn't in there in the larger conversation of things. So Eddie Ellis had really been putting in work and serving 25 years. Actually, there's some talk with some politicians, including Yusef Salam, about getting him exonerated because they took away 20 years of his life for something he didn't. Look, I don't know if people know this, but it's going around. More than half of wrongful convictions are people who look like me and you.
Of
We're the
course.
ones,
Of course.
especially for the percentage of us who in this country, who we're always, I mean, everybody, Innocent Project is long overdue. They do great work, but we got so many people who've been wrongly convicted in
Right.
these.
Miss Salam, that's why she started her Justice for the Wrongfully
Exactly,
Incarcerated.
what she does
And
on
the majority of the
that on
people that are
Saturdays, and they come in
incarcerated
and
are
they
us.
educate people at
Yes.
USAF's office on 118th Street, 163 Lenox. Yeah,
Right.
but
Right.
we need more people. We
Yeah.
need more of these organizations. One is not
Right.
enough,
No.
to have more of this, because we're the
Right.
ones who are being disproportionately locked up.
Absolutely. And that is impactful. And on that note, um, we're going to close, but that is also impactful to families because when you lock up a family member, as was shared yesterday, it impacts all of the people in the family. It could impact the other children. It is a financial strain on the family if it's a breadwinner that was locked up, but also when a family member is locked up, just to make phone calls to them, visit, try to make sure that they're eating properly, all of these things impacts our community. So we've got a lot of great work to do. This has been an amazing conversation. Anything that we, Harlem Network News, can do to support you, please keep us informed. We want to assure that our community is engaged. There's a great need for our children, particularly in Central Harlem, which is probably magnified everywhere. that they have the knowledge, that they know their history, that they are interested, because there's a movement to just keep them not knowing and not wanting to know. So we've got to really make some changes. Yes.
One thing I want people to know, they can always, there is a mural on 125th Street in Madison of my mother. It was
Oh,
done by an artist called Evan Bishop. He works part of the Uptown Collective. And with those murals, she's right next to the rapper Cameron, who's from
oh,
Harlem.
wow.
When you
Okay.
go over there, you can
Cameron.
see. And in fact, on the program with from yesterday, said this picture right here, this
Mm,
is actually a mural of her that's on 125th Street that people pass by. And a
okay.
lot of people don't realize that
Okay. So 125th
and
and
Madison. Yep.
Madison.
Yes.
Okay. And just for note, she's next to the rapper Cameron,
Yep.
who you know, also went to school with my children.
Yeah.
So we know that.
Your children went to Manhattan Center?
Initially he was at Central Park East Secondary,
Oh, okay,
and then
yeah.
he moved to Manhattan Center.
Yeah, I'm a
You
Manhattan
know,
Center alumni
yeah,
also.
he was a big baller.
Yeah, I'm around.
So,
I was already gone by the time he got there.
okay, okay,
Nonetheless, yeah.
yeah. So lot of cross pollination here in Harlem. But
Yep.
thank you so much. This is Harlem Network News. Please support us. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Make donations. Zelle, harlemnetworknews@gmail.com. Hit us up on Cash App, $ Harlem Network News, and we also have a GoFundMe. But also, if you have information or stories or skills, reach out to us, because we are the voice and drumbeat of Harlem, and a lot of stuff that happens in our community happens in a drumbeat. And so it's very important. The work that we're trying to do is to just engage the people and, basically combat what is happening on mainstream media or what's not happening. So here we are. So thank you so much. This is great, and I'm inspired, and we have a lot going on in this, even though a lot going on in the city. We just had the coronation for the new pastor of the Abyssinian Baptist Church, and Senator Warnock was there. So as you say, so goes Harlem, so goes the world. This is the Mecca, and we know that James Baldwin said that. So we're here. We're still here, and still we rise. Thank you so much. Have a
Thank you for
blessed,
having me.
prosperous day. Take care.
Okay.
Thank you.